picture for a second, you have an amazing organization here in Britain and you're looking to grow it. And of course, perhaps you're finding talent easily around you. However, the smart company leader will be thinking this: where are my next set of leaders going to come from? In fact, where are my next set of talent going to come from? And if you look at the talent pool and you're truly aware, you will notice that it is drying up. The reason it's drying up is manifold, but there is one skill that if you're a teacher, you should be teaching your students. If you're an employer, you should be encouraging future employees to learn, certainly by the time they work for you to learn. That number one skill that will help on so many levels is the skill of public speaking. And you might say, hold on, we're not here to be a motivational speaker like you, Harun Rabbani. We're not here to get everyone to do presentations. Oh, really? In this episode of the Young Leaders Nexus podcast, we are going to explore the powerful reasons why you must, as a growing organization or as a teacher, look out for those people who have public speaking skills. And if you're somebody who's looking after young people, my goodness, do not ignore this. My name is Harun Rabbani. I am the founder of the Young Leaders Nexus, and we have a very simple cause: to find the hidden talent amongst the young and create leaders out of them. God knows how desperately we need good leaders in the UK and beyond. First of all, public speaking is an aspect of communication. So here's the thing with communication. When you have good communication between you as an employer and your employees, you're going to have trust. When you have good communication between you and a prospective client or existing clients, you have trust, you have loyalty. Without that trust, you don't get the engagement, you don't get the loyalty, and you certainly miss out on so much of the business. Because the truth is this: if you're a busy person, are you somebody who's going to really want to go shopping around every time you are looking for a new product? No. You're very likely, if you're really somebody who's making a difference, you're really likely going to stick to your same supplier, same provider. So communication is essential for long-term and even short-term success. Public speaking, how does that fit in? Well, most people assume public speaking means standing on stage behind a podium or on stage without a podium and presenting, motivating and giving a lecture. That's actually far, far from the truth. Here are the three overarching elements that true quality public speaking will give you. Number one characteristic trait or number one skill you will develop within public speaking is critical thinking. You're going to present information to your audience, whether it be one person, whether it be a boardroom, whether it be to customers, the team, or to the entire world because you're on broadcast media. So critical thinking means discerning between truth and falsehood, knowing what's backed up by evidence and what is fluff. So gathering this information, even if it's just on Google, is an important step in critical thinking. And then when you've got all this information, well, you can't just bombard everything onto your listener, your audience. You've got to break it down in a way that it's simplified, distilled. So that requires critical thinking, critical analysis, logic, rationale. The next element of public speaking is the ability to take responsibility. Can you imagine this? Taking on a workforce or having students who basically will only do what you tell them to do and nothing else. That's useful if you have an assembly line worker where they're only doing one element of the assembly line. But that, my friend, was from the Victorian era, and maybe it went all the way through to the 50s and 60s last century. Today, there's very few organizations just have assembly lines, particularly in the UK. So personal responsibility means taking ownership of one's actions, one's consequences of the actions, and not being the victim, but being a leader in it. Yeah, all of this goes into public speaking preparation, by the way. Speaking of which, personal responsibility in public speaking means preparing your speech, practicing your speech, and then turning up on the day, delivering with impact on behalf of whoever you're representing. And then finally, a very core element of public speaking is accountability. If your message lands, you're going to be accountable for the things that are positive, of course, as well as the things that have not worked out, things that you need to improve on. You've got to be accountable to the boss. You've got to be accountable to the person whose time you've taken to present, because time is the number one resource that nobody can get back. So it's very important that you're accountable to all these people as well as yourself, because the truth is this, my friend, if you are delivering a speech or a presentation, then you owe it to yourself to bring the best version of yourself, and all the preparation that you've done, all the critical thinking and the responsible stuff that you've done will determine the impact of your work. Public speaking means having a clear and concise message that you give with clarity. Most people think public speaking is like having the gift of the gab. I was in medical sales for nearly a decade and did sales before that and after that as well. Let me tell you, I became number one in 2 major global companies, and it was not because I had the gift of the gab. Actually, it was because I listened. Active listening is a key component in preparing for your speech, and truth be told, when you're speaking, not lecturing, you're having this interaction between you and the audience. How many times have you been to an event where somebody from the audience asked the speaker a question and the speaker responded with such beautiful eloquence because they listened with intent and with precision? If you have these speaking skills and you're working with a team, then you're able to disseminate your knowledge and experience because you are able to communicate it out to the relevant people. Of course, public speaking is vital if you're ever going to lead a team, if you're ever going to work with customers. Without this ability to express yourself on behalf of yourself and your company, how is the customer or the client ever going to know what you're trying to communicate? As an employer, you're taking on someone to sit into a leadership role. Well, leadership involves motivating and influencing people. Influence means giving someone information to move from point A to point B and evoking that emotional response, that motivation to take action. If you're a leader and you want to be influential in whatever environment, you need to be able to communicate in a way that commands respect, or at least commands attention and credibility. All businesses want to grow, want to make a difference. In order to do that, in order to get people to change, the public speaking ability will help you to become a lot more persuasive in your argument. When I used to sell medical devices for the company called Olympus KeyMed, I noticed that when I used to visit my customers, the only person they would associate with KeyMed was me. I was my company. So can you imagine if I fumbled and bumbled in my communication with customers? What would they think of my company? But I didn't do that. I had very good communication skills. And so my reputation was my company's reputation. You see, if you're a big organization, your reputation, your brand might be great. But the moment you have a member of staff with somebody else from a different company and they start developing relationships, that person then becomes the face of your organization. So are they communicating your values, your culture, your beliefs, your desires? Every company faces crises, faces stumbling blocks from time to time. When a crisis hits, the last thing you want is your staff abandoning your company like rats off a sinking ship. You want them to be able to stand and support you rather than abandon you, and be able to communicate what it is that you're trying to do, your new promises, what you're willing to do to help restore the faith of your customers in you. And so having good public speaking skills, of course, is very useful. And like I mentioned, your brand image, how your team communicates in and out of your company, is part of the brand image that they are portraying. Here are 5 ways people with public speaking abilities, good ones I'm talking about, will bring to the table for you. Number 1, they'll be able to negotiate effectively on your behalf. Number 2, they'll be able to lead and engage the team. Engaging meaning motivate your team to do work. Employee engagement is plummeting across the board, so you need leaders who know how to engage a team. Most management and leadership roles involve some level of research, some more than others. Public speaking gives the ability to your staff to be able to present research findings effectively to your audience, and that might be internal or external. When you take on new staff, of course, it's very time consuming and very expensive to train them up. So when you've got members of staff who've been trained in public speaking, in this level of communication, they'll be able to train far more effectively your new staff, saving you time, money, effort, and perhaps stopping you from going into a crisis. And the fifth one is advocacy. You want your team to be champions for your organization. You don't want them coming in 9 till 5 and that's it. They never ever have to think of you again. You know, the truth is, when I used to work for my company, KeyMed, and then later on Gyrus, which was taken over by KeyMed, I lived and breathed my company, not for any unfounded loyalties. I wasn't mad, but when I represented them, it was with my heart and soul. How amazing would that be if your team was doing this? If you are part of the leadership team or a management team or even the boss of the company, you might say, well, why the heck would I want to hire somebody with public leadership skills? You might be a skeptic. You might say something like, it's not relevant to my industry. Really? And show me one industry across the world where they do not need effective communications. Of course, every person needs to have the speaking skills to be able to communicate effectively. Even if it's a job where they're in a broom cupboard working on a computer, they've still got to communicate, even if it's not verbally, perhaps by written form. However, most of us don't have those kind of jobs where we work in total isolation. You might say, hey, half my staff are introverts. Why would they want to learn public speaking? Yeah, that is 100% correct for you to be skeptical about that, because we assume that the best public speakers are extroverts. Far from it. The truth is this: some of the best, most impactful public speakers are actually highly introverted. I, believe it or not, have an introverted nature. My oldest son is totally introverted and he doesn't like to be in social environments, and yet by learning public speaking skills he's been able to exponentially increase his rise through the companies he's working for. He's having so much of an influence even on small teams and his customers. So it does work. If you're an introvert, the way you get trained in public speaking perhaps might be slightly different to an extrovert, but the truth is you definitely need to learn public speaking. You might say, well, hold on, we can train our people, our staff in public speaking. Yes, you can train them, you can hire them without the skills, except the cost of training is very expensive. If you were to train someone in public speaking, it takes a long time, because it's not just about passing information. Number one thing is to practice that information. So would you prefer somebody trained up in that area entering the workplace, or do you want to put aside weeks, maybe even months aside to train them, to get them to practice? In the meantime, they are not doing the job that you are paying them for. You're leaving money at the table and you are making yourself less competitive. Don't get me wrong. Of course, I do strongly urge all companies to have ongoing personal development training, skills development training for sure. But if we can train them earlier on, wouldn't that be amazing? You might be thinking, we will hire someone according to their experience. We're just going to focus on experience. They don't need presentation skills. Yeah, well, here's the thing. Your customers, they're skeptics as well. They are looking for the best for what they're paying for. If you're not able to communicate that value, guess what's going to happen? You're going to struggle. Your suppliers, they want to provide the best that they can. Well, some of them might want to con you. But in supplying that, if you can't express exactly what you want in terms that they understand, then you're going to have a mismatch of information. As a result, nobody's happy. And then finally, you might say, it's so expensive to train people in public speaking. Yeah, of course it is, because in terms of money, in terms of time. And so here is what the Young Leaders Nexus is doing. We're training teenagers all over the country, no matter what their background, introverted, extroverted, a lot of knowledge, not enough knowledge. We are teaching them, training them, and giving them the ability to be able to communicate effectively. Now, of course, we know the state of the government is, well, questionable at the best of times. Fear not, Young Leaders Nexus is doing something absolutely massive and magical. The cost of training someone in public speaking, of course, is going to be very high, especially when they're adults, because they are less malleable and they need a lot more practice. But what if you started young? And so this is what the Young Leaders Nexus is doing. We are going into schools and working with businesses and working with schools and working with the young people to help train them up in public speaking. Now, if you are a business of any size, to be honest with you, if you're a business and you want to get involved in the development of young leaders by teaching them this powerful skills, then there's so much we can talk about. I won't mention it in this video, but contact me. Go through my LinkedIn account and connect with me directly. So finally, let me leave you with this. There are a whole bunch of positions, roles that young people or any people can step into that involve public speaking skills. Sales is what makes the engine of all businesses run. Without the sales, you've got a hobby or a bust company. So sales is important. The other one is marketing. That requires all the skills that you develop as a public speaker. Then, of course, customer services. That goes naturally because you're speaking with customers all the time. Have you ever noticed in these programs where the lawyer represents someone, is presenting their information to the judge or the jury? Guess what? Public speaking skills. So in the field of law. What about public relations and PR? People who have to be phenomenal at public speaking to be able to communicate their customers, their clients' information to the media. Teaching, of course, public speaking skills. Politics. Public speaking skills are certainly needed there. We need to clean up how they do their public speaking, of course, at least content-wise, because there seems to be a bit of authenticity missing from most of politicians. So public speaking is a skill that all politicians need. If you're in management, any kind of organization, or human resources people constantly having to deal with other humans, because it's in the title, right? And then there's broadcast media. So this could be social media. All companies need some kind of social media presence, whether you like it or not. That's very important. Or mainstream media, or anything that involves broadcasting. There have been tons and tons of books written about public speaking and lots of people learning public speaking skills. But the one thing I would love to see across the world is, if you are a teacher, if you're an employer, if you're a student, then how amazing it would be that you're able to express yourself. Did you know one of the biggest causes of illnesses is a lack of expression? When I'm talking about illnesses, I'm talking about mental illnesses. So what do? We send them off to counseling, talk therapy, psychotherapy. What are they doing? They are expressing themselves. When you're suppressing your truth, unable to communicate effectively, not only do you have mental health challenges, you're also going to have chronic diseases or autoimmune diseases. That might not be the singular cause, but it certainly is a contributing factor. Public speaking is way, way more powerful than we've all been led to believe. I've been doing all the talking, public speaking. Now it's your turn. If you had public speaking skills, what's the number one reason, or what's the most common way you would use public speaking to benefit yourself and or benefit others? Hope this has been useful to you. Make sure you do the usual stuff. Share this video at least with 3 people who you think will benefit from learning more about public speaking. And I would love, by the way, employers and teachers to watch this video. So make sure you share it to them as well. See you next time.